I never thought my life would take such a turn at 67. On a quiet morning in my house in the suburbs of Riverside, sipping strong black tea, I pondered the vicissitudes of fate as I stared at the old photograph on the mantelpiece. Edgar, my husband, who had left this world 20 years ago, was smiling from it. "You'd be proud of me, you old grouch," I whispered, running my finger along the frame. I'd had a hard time since his death. A young widow with a 12-year-old daughter and the tiny industrial chemicals business I'd started with Edgar. Many predicted bankruptcy for me. "A woman can't handle such a complicated business," they said. But I did. What's more, over 15 years of hard work, I turned our little company into one of the leading suppliers of specialty chemicals to industries all along the West Coast. 5 years ago, I sold the business. Not because I was tired or not doing well, but because I realized it was time to live for myself. A large chemical corporation offered me a sum I was foolish to refuse. Many people in my place would have bought a villa on the coast or a penthouse in the city center, would start traveling the world first class. But I stayed in my old house, the same one where Edgar and I had lived. The only thing I allowed myself to do was to update the kitchen and add the porch I'd always dreamed of. I invested the money from the sale of the business with the help of Connor Abernathy, a smart financier who had been recommended to me. He turned out to be not only a talented investor, but also a pleasant conversationalist. We quickly hit it off, and I soon became one of his company's largest investors. But only he and I knew about it. I glanced at my watch. It was 11:30. It was time to get ready to go to the local library, where I led a reading group for the elderly. This activity brought me sincere joy. After so many years of fighting for a place under the sun in the harsh world of business, simple human companionship seemed like a real treasure. My phone rang as I was putting on my coat. My daughter's name, Olivia, popped up on the screen. We hadn't spoken in almost a month, which was, alas, routine. "Hello, sweetheart," I answered, trying to hide the surprise in my voice. "Hi, Mom." I could hear the tension in her tone. "I have news. Harper and I have decided to get married." I froze with my coat half on. Olivia and this guy had only been dating for 6 months. He worked as some kind of manager at an investment firm, and from what little I'd seen of our fleeting encounter, was a narcissistic, pompous turkey. "It's a big decision," I said cautiously. "Are you sure you're not in a hurry?" "Mom, I'm 32 years old." Her voice became instantly irritated. "I know what I'm doing. We've already set a date, in 3 weeks. So soon?" I couldn't hide my amazement. "Yes, we don't see any point in delaying. We've already booked Riverside Gardens and sent out the invitations." I sank slowly into a chair in the hallway. So they'd already made up their minds and hadn't even seen fit to tell me before. "I see," I said, feeling bitter. "When will I get to meet your fiancé's family?" There was a pause. "Actually, we're having a pre-wedding dinner tomorrow at the Côte d'Azur, 7 p.m. tomorrow." I couldn't hide my surprise. "And you're just telling me this now?" "Yeah, we've been very busy, Mom." She sounded annoyed, mixed with something akin to guilt. "There's so much to organize." I knew exactly what was going on. Olivia was embarrassed of me. Her mother, who spoke with a slight working-class accent and wore unfashionable clothes, who lived in an old house in an undesirable neighborhood and didn't fit into the glossy picture of life my daughter had worked so hard to create on social media. "Of course I'll come," I said firmly, deciding not to escalate the situation. "Thank you for inviting me." "Okay." She clearly wanted to end the conversation as soon as possible. "Just, Mom," she hesitated. "Yeah? Could you wear something, something decent?" I clutched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. My own daughter was ashamed of me enough to worry about my appearance in front of her rich new friends. Don't worry, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I won't embarrass you in front of your Harper. Mom, that's not what I meant. I'll see you tomorrow, honey. I interrupted her and disconnected without waiting for an answer. I put the phone down and just sat there for a while, staring into space. When did my girl turn into this superficial young woman for whom external gloss and social status became more important than sincere relationships? Maybe it was my own fault? After Edgar's death, I was so consumed with the struggle for survival, developing the business, that perhaps I didn't pay enough attention to her. Or was it something else? Olivia had always been ambitious, eager since childhood to escape our humble home, the working-class neighborhood of Riverside. She was ashamed of my background, my accent, even my success, because it had to do with dirty business, with chemicals and factories, not glossy offices and designer suits. When I sold the company, I decided not to change my lifestyle for several reasons. First, I just loved my home and my neighborhood. It was where my friends were, my memories. Second, I wanted to see how Olivia would treat me if she thought I only had a modest pension. And, admittedly, I wasn't happy with the result. Our relationship grew increasingly sour. She rarely called, even less came to visit. When Harper came along, it got worse. I only saw him once, when they accidentally stopped by my place for 5 minutes. He barely concealed his disdain as he looked around my house and quickly took Olivia away, citing some important meeting. I sighed and went back to packing for the library. Life went on, and I had to decide what to wear for dinner tomorrow night. Maybe the dark blue dress I'd bought on sale last year. It was simple but elegant. Or maybe I should have splurged on something new to show my daughter and her fiancé that even a working-class old lady could look dignified. In the end, I decided to remain myself. If my future son-in-law and his family judge me by my clothes rather than my character and actions, that's their problem, not mine. Stepping out of the house, I breathed in the fresh spring air. It was a beautiful day, and I wasn't about to let an upcoming meeting ruin it. After all, I had lived a decent life. I'd built a successful business from scratch, raised a daughter, and survived the loss of my beloved husband. If anyone thought I was a failure because of my accent or address, that was their delusion. On the way to the library, I pondered Harper. What did I know about him? Only what Olivia told me in her rare phone calls. 35 years old, works for some investment firm, likes golf and expensive restaurants, lives in an upscale Riverside neighborhood, drives a German car. Superficial information about a superficial man. I wonder if he knew that his fiancée grew up in a family of chemical plant owners. Or did Olivia come up with a more noble pedigree? I wouldn't be surprised. My daughter was always trying to seem like someone else, more refined and aristocratic than she really was. The thought of the upcoming dinner had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was happy for my daughter if she had really found her happiness. On the other, I had my doubts. This Harper seemed to me too smug, too fixated on the trappings of success. Such people are rarely truly happy, and even less likely to make others happy. But what could I do? Olivia was a grown woman who made her own decisions. Even if those decisions seemed wrong to me, I had no right to interfere. All I had to do was stand by her side and support her as much as she would let me. My students were already waiting for me in the library, a group of elderly people with whom we read and discussed classic literature. Today's program was Dickens' Great Expectations, ironic given the circumstances. Immersed in the discussion of the novel, I forgot my troubles for a while. Literature has always been a refuge for me, a place where reality receded before the power of imagination. When I got home, I took the dark blue dress out of my closet and examined it critically. It did look elegant, even though it wasn't from a famous designer. I decided to accessorize it with the pearl necklace Edgar had given me for our 10th wedding anniversary. A simple but exquisite piece of jewelry with a story, just like me. As I fell asleep that night, I thought about tomorrow night's dinner. What awaited me there? The condescending looks? The condescending smiles? Or maybe I'd be wrong, and the Harper family would turn out to be nice people who would accept me for who I was? Time will tell, I decided, turning off the nightlight. After all, in my long life, I've learned to deal with far more difficult situations than dinner with pompous snobs. And if this Harper thinks he can look down on me, he doesn't know who he's dealing with yet. The Azure restaurant was in the most upscale part of Riverside. I took a cab 15 minutes before the scheduled time and pulled up in front of the imposing building with its columns and glass facade. The young uniformed valet cast a dismissive glance at my cab, but politely opened the door for me. "Good evening, ma'am." I nodded and walked to the entrance, feeling unaccustomed nervousness. My dark blue dress and pearl necklace seemed appropriate for such an occasion, but I knew Olivia might think otherwise. Inside, the restaurant was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters in perfectly pressed suits. The maitre d' met me at the entrance. "What can I do for you, ma'am? I'm here for the Huxtable Radley dinner." His gaze slid down my dress, and I noticed a slight shadow of confusion. He must have expected something more expensive and fashionable. "Of course, follow me." He led me through the main hall to a separate banquet room. Along the way, I spotted several of the city's famous faces: bankers, politicians, business owners. Some of them had once been my clients or partners, but they didn't recognize me now, which was understandable. I always kept a low profile, preferring to be represented by others. About 20 people were already gathered in the banquet hall. I noticed Olivia immediately. She was standing next to a tall man I recognized as Harper. My daughter looked dazzling in a cream dress that I was sure cost more than my entire closet. Her hair was gathered into an elegant updo, and a diamond necklace glittered around her neck, surely a gift from her fiancé. Harper was the first to notice me. He leaned over to Olivia and whispered something in her ear. She turned around, and an expression flashed across her face that could be interpreted as a mixture of embarrassment and annoyance. But she quickly got over herself and smiled, heading toward me. "Mom, you came." She lightly touched my cheek in a mock kiss, trying not to ruin my makeup. Meet Harper's parents, Eldon and Bridget Radley. The elderly couple standing nearby turned to me. The man was tall, with gray hair and a commanding expression. The woman was slender, with impeccable hair and a pearl necklace much more expensive than mine. "Pleased to meet you," Eldon said, shaking my hand with restrained politeness. "It's a pleasure," Bridget added, eyeing me appraisingly. "Olivia has told me so much about you." I doubted it, but I smiled back. "Likewise, I've heard so much about your family." Harper walked over to us, putting his arm around Olivia's waist in a possessive gesture. "There's the famous Mrs. Huxtable," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "At last we meet under normal circumstances." "Just Beverly, please," I replied, extending my hand to him. "It's nice to get to know you better, Harper." He shook my hand, and I noticed the way he discreetly wiped his palm on his pants after shaking it. "Olivia told me you were retired?" he asked with a slight chuckle. "What do you do all day? Knit? Watch soap operas?" Olivia giggled as if he'd said something incredibly witty. "Harper, don't be like that." She slapped him playfully on the shoulder. "Mom has a very active lifestyle. Don't you, Mom?" "Yes, I do a lot of things," I replied calmly. "I run a reading group at the library. I garden, and sometimes I counsel aspiring entrepreneurs." "Oh, counseling," Harper chuckled. "And how much do they pay for your invaluable advice? $10 an hour?" Olivia laughed again, but I saw a glimmer of something akin to shame in her eyes. I usually do it for free, I replied. Some things in life are more valuable than money, Harper. It's a comfort to those who don't have it, he countered. But let's not be sad. Let me show you to your seat. He led me to a table where, to my surprise, I was assigned a seat almost at the very back, far from the main seats where the young people and their parents were supposed to sit. I sat down silently, deciding not to make a big deal out of it. The next hour was filled with small talk. The guests were arriving, the drinks were flowing, the waiters were scurrying between the tables with delicious hors d'oeuvres. I sat between Harper's elderly aunt, who was almost deaf, and some coworker who was too busy on his phone to keep up a conversation. Finally, the last guests arrived, and Harper rose to give a toast. Dear friends and family, he began, raising his glass of champagne. Olivia and I are so happy to see you all here today, on the eve of our big day. I want to thank my parents, Eldon and Bridget, for their invaluable support and the example of a perfect marriage they set for us. Everyone clapped, and I noticed Olivia looking at her fiancé with adoration. I also want to welcome Olivia's mother, Beverly, Harper continued, pointing in my direction, who came all the way from where you live. Never mind. Anyway, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to knit and watch daytime TV shows. Laughter erupted, and I felt the color flood my cheeks. Olivia looked embarrassed, but didn't say a word in my defense. Olivia has so much potential, Harper continued, and I'm glad I was able to help her break out of her, shall we say, less privileged past. Not everyone has such a brilliant pedigree as the Radley family, but I'm sure that with my help, Olivia will soon forget her humble roots. I sat, clenching my fists under the table but keeping my outward composure, not for the sake of that pompous turkey, but for my daughter. As awful as Harper was, she'd chosen him, and I had to respect her choice, even if I didn't understand it. After the toast, dinner began. The food was exquisite, the wines were expensive, but none of it brought me any pleasure. I felt like a stranger at this celebration of life, where I had been invited only out of courtesy. About halfway through dinner, I noticed a familiar face among the guests. Connor Abernathy, my financial advisor and business partner, was sitting at a neighboring table. He noticed me and nodded slightly, but didn't approach me. I was surprised to see him here, but then I remembered that he'd mentioned his company, where Harper apparently worked. After the main course, there was a break before dessert, and the guests scattered around the room, socializing in small groups. I took advantage of this moment to go out onto the restaurant's terrace, where it was quiet and deserted. I needed some fresh air after all the barbs and dismissive glances. Not a very pleasant evening, was it? Came a voice behind me. I turned around and saw Connor come and stand beside me at the railing of the terrace. Connor, what a surprise, I said. I didn't know you knew the Radley family. Not that I do, he smiled. But Harper works at my company. He's a middle manager in the investment department. Not a bad worker, though a little too ambitious for his abilities. So you're his boss. I couldn't hold back a smile. Interesting coincidence. It's a small world, especially in Riverside. He shrugged. But I didn't know he was marrying your daughter until I got the invitation. Olivia's a beautiful girl. Thank you, I sighed, though she wouldn't appreciate a compliment from my acquaintance right now. We hadn't been very close lately. Connor nodded understandingly. I've noticed the way he treats you. Pretty disrespectful. That's an understatement, I grinned bitterly. But for Olivia's sake, I'm willing to put up with it. Is she happy at least? I thought for a moment. I'm not sure. She thinks she is. Harper represents everything she's been striving for. Prestige, money, social status. But true happiness? I don't know. We were silent for a while, looking at the lights of the city. You know, Connor said finally, I could tell everyone who you really are right now. Put that upstart in his place. No, I shook my head. No, I shook my head. It would only complicate things. If Olivia finds out that I've been hiding my financial situation from her all this time, she'll be even more distant. But you don't have to take that kind of treatment, he argued. You're one of the most successful businesswomen I know. You're the controlling shareholder of my company, for crying out loud, and he treats you like some useless old woman. Let him, I shrugged. I know who I am, Connor. I don't need to prove it to a pompous turkey who judges people by the price of their clothes. Connor shook his head, but smiled. You've always been too generous, Beverly, but here's the deal. I won't reveal our business relationship at the wedding, but if he crosses the line, I reserve the right to intervene. Deal, I nodded. And thank you for not judging me for this little experiment with my daughter. Every parent has the right to see if their children are loved for who they are, not their money, Connor said. Although admittedly, that's a pretty drastic way to go about it. At that moment, the door to the terrace opened, and Olivia appeared on the threshold. Mom, there you are. Dash, she exclaimed. Everyone's getting ready for dessert, and you've disappeared. She shifted her gaze to Connor, and her eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Abernathy, I didn't know you knew my mother. We just met, Connor said quickly, holding out his hand to me. Connor Abernathy, nice to meet you, Mrs. Huxtable. I accepted his hand, appreciating the quickness of his reaction. Likewise, Mr. Abernathy, you work with Harper? Yes, you could say that, he smiled. Your daughter has made an excellent choice. Harper is a very determined young man. Olivia brightened at this dubious praise. Thank you. Harper always speaks of you with such respect. He works so hard to impress you. Does he? Connor gave me a quick glance. Well, I'll keep that in mind. We should get back, Olivia said, taking my arm. Harper wants to make another toast. Of course, darling. I let her lead me away, nodding goodbye to Connor. Back in the hall, I noticed that Harper was watching our return from the terrace with slight concern. Apparently, he recognized Connor and was concerned that I was talking to his boss. Ah, there's the bride's mom, he said as we approached the table. Join us, Beverly. I was just telling everyone how Olivia and I met. I sat down in my seat, feeling the stares of the guests. It was at a fundraiser for the city hospital, Harper continued. Olivia looked so elegant that I immediately decided to meet her. Who would have guessed that such a sophisticated girl had grown up in, well, let's just say in more humble circumstances? Olivia smiled nervously, but said nothing. But that just proves that talent and beauty can come from anywhere, he added with fake sincerity, even from a family with no special accomplishments. I felt something tighten inside. Not because of his words, they didn't hurt me. It was the fact that Olivia had let him say those things about her family, about her mother. I'm sorry, Harper, came a voice from across the table. It was Connor. But I think you're being a little inaccurate. As I understand it, Mrs. Huxtable was a successful businesswoman before she retired. That could hardly be called a lack of achievement. There was an awkward silence. Harper clearly hadn't expected his boss to stand up for me. Well, of course, he muttered, changing his tone quickly. I meant compared to international standards. A small local business is certainly an accomplishment too, just on a different scale. Any successful business starts small, Connor said calmly, and it requires great strength of character and intelligence to survive in a competitive environment. Don't you think so, Mrs. Huxtable? All eyes turned to me. Olivia looked embarrassed, Harper looked annoyed, and Connor was looking at me with a faintly reassuring smile. Absolutely, I replied. Though some people find it hard to appreciate success unless it's accompanied by outward splendor and ostentatious luxury. Harper blushed, and Olivia's parents exchanged glances. I realized I'd gone too far, and I quickly added with a smile, "But we're not here today to discuss business, but to celebrate the love of my daughter and Harper. Here's to you, darlings." I raised my glass, and everyone was relieved to follow suit. The tension eased a little, and the conversation resumed. Olivia gave me a grateful look, though I could see that my little confrontation with her fiancé hadn't gone unnoticed. The rest of the evening passed without much incident. Harper became more restrained in his comments, though I still caught some of his unpleasant glances. Olivia seemed torn between wanting to please her fiancé and some nascent feelings of guilt toward me. As the evening drew to a close, Connor came over to say goodbye. "It was nice to meet you, Mrs. Huxtable," he said loud enough for those around him to hear. Then, leaning closer, he added in a whisper, "Hang in there, Beverly. All that's left is to get through the wedding itself." "Thank you, Connor," I said quietly. "I'll see you the day after tomorrow." He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I looked at Olivia, who was saying goodbye to the guests, holding Harper's hand. She looked happy, but was it real happiness or just an imitation of it created for those around her? I didn't know the answer, but I did know one thing. For my daughter's sake, I was willing to endure humiliation from her fiancé, at least for now. But if he kept it up at the wedding, I wasn't sure I'd be able to hold it together. And who knows where that would lead. The day of the wedding was surprisingly sunny for Riverside, which was notorious for its frequent rain, even in the summer. I woke up early with a heavy feeling in my chest. The upcoming ceremony was giving me mixed emotions. On the one hand, I was happy for Olivia, if she had truly found her happiness. On the other, I couldn't shake the thought that Harper wasn't the man to make my daughter truly happy. The wedding ceremony was to take place at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at Riverside Gardens, a luxurious country estate with manicured gardens and a huge banquet hall. I booked a cab for 3 o'clock in the afternoon, deciding to arrive early so I could have time to speak to my daughter before the ceremony. As I prepared, my thoughts kept returning to the pre-wedding dinner and Harper's humiliating comments. I remembered how Olivia had laughed at his jokes, how she hadn't stood up for me, but I also remembered the shame that flashed in her eyes for a moment. Maybe deep down inside, she knew his behavior was unacceptable. For the wedding ceremony, I chose an elegant lavender-colored dress that I had bought especially for the occasion at one of Riverside's finest boutiques. It was the first truly expensive dress I had allowed myself in many years, not because I couldn't afford such things before, but because I didn't see the need for them. But today was a special day, the wedding of my only daughter, and I'll admit, a small part of me wanted to make an impression, to show that Olivia's mother wasn't the unemployed loser Harper had made her out to be. By 2 hours and 50 minutes, I was fully prepared. The short haircut I'd worn for years was neatly styled. Edgar's pearl necklace contrasted beautifully with the color of the dress. I tinted my lips with discreet lipstick and put on low-heeled shoes. I didn't want to risk high heels, considering that part of the ceremony was going to take place outdoors. The cab arrived exactly at the appointed time. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, helped me into the car and carefully closed the door. "To the wedding, ma'am?" he asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "Yes, my daughter is getting married," I replied with a slight smile. "Congratulations. You must be very proud." I hesitated to answer. "Of course I am. Every mother wants her child to be happy." He nodded, not noticing my uncertainty, and focused on the road. Riverside Gardens was a 20-minute drive from the center of town. As we got further away from the hustle and bustle of the city, the scenery became more and more picturesque. rolling green hills, sparse farmhouses, small lakes. Finally, the cab turned onto a wide alley lined with century-old oaks that led to the complex. Already from afar, it was evident that the place was decorated with a great deal of grandeur. White ribbons and floral arrangements decorated the gates and trees along the alley. At the main entrance stood young men in strict suits, welcoming the guests and pointing the way to the place of the ceremony. I paid the driver, leaving a generous tip, and headed for the entrance. One of the young men immediately approached me. "Welcome to the Huxtable Radley wedding. May I ask your name?" "Beverly Huxtable. I'm the mother of the bride." His attitude changed instantly. He straightened up and smiled even wider. "Of course, Mrs. Huxtable. Miss Olivia is waiting for you in the preparation room. Let me show you out." He led me through the main building, past the decorated banquet hall, where the waiters were already bustling about, setting tables and arranging cutlery, to the small annex where the bride and her bridesmaids were preparing for the ceremony. As we approached the door, I heard Olivia's ringing laughter and the women's voices. A young man knocked and announced, "Mrs. Huxtable has arrived." The door was opened by one of the bridesmaids, a slender blonde in a soft pink dress that I vaguely remembered from the pre-wedding dinner. "Oh, hello. Come in." Olivia was just finishing her hair. I stepped into the spacious room, which was filled with a festive atmosphere. Three other girls in similar pink dresses were helping each other with makeup and hairstyles, and in the center of the room, in front of a large mirror, sat Olivia. My daughter looked dazzling. Her wedding dress, with its long train and delicate lace, looked like it had stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo with fresh flowers and pearl studs. She turned when she saw me, and for a moment there was an expression in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. Surprise, embarrassment, or maybe even joy? "Mom," she said, standing up, "you're early." "I wanted to see you before the ceremony," I replied, coming closer. "You look beautiful, dear." She smiled slightly, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Thank you. You too. You look good too." "New dress?" "Yeah, I got it especially for your wedding." There was an awkward pause. The bridesmaids, sensing the tension, tactfully retreated to a far corner of the room, giving us the illusion of privacy. "Olivia," I began quietly, "I just want you to know that no matter what, I want you to be happy. If Harper is the one you choose, I respect your choice." She looked at me in mild bewilderment, as if she hadn't expected me to say that. "Thank you, Mom," she finally said. "I know that you and Harper haven't exactly hit it off, but he's a really good man. He cares about me." I held back the comment that was about to roll off my tongue. Today was not the day to argue. "I'm glad you're happy," I said instead. "That's all that matters." She nodded, and to my surprise, gave me a quick hug. "Dash, I have to finish getting ready. The ceremony is in an hour." "Of course," I stepped back. "I'll see you at the ceremony." I left the room with a heavy heart. This moment might have been an opportunity for Olivia and I to bond, but there was still a wall of miscommunication and misunderstanding between us, and I wasn't sure that getting married to Harper would help break down that wall. The ceremony was technically flawless. The weather was perfect, the decorations exquisite, the music touching. Olivia walked down the aisle alone, as Edgar was not alive to fulfill the traditional role of father. I sat in the front row, barely holding back tears, not so much from joy, but from the realization that I was finally losing my daughter today. Harper stood at the altar, looking impeccable in his expensive suit. He smiled as Olivia approached him, but I didn't see the boundless love in his eyes that you'd expect to see in a groom's eyes, more like the satisfaction of a good purchase. The exchange of vows, the rings, the kiss, everything went like clockwork. Guests applauded. Photographers clicked their cameras. The couple glowed. The perfect picture for social media. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the banquet hall for a celebratory dinner. I was seated at a table where a few distant Harper relatives and a couple of elderly Radley family friends sat besides me. Again, not at the main table where the newlyweds and Harper's parents sat. I tried not to take it personally. After all, I was here for Olivia, not myself. If she and her new husband were more comfortable keeping me at a distance, I could live with that, at least for one night. The dinner was exquisite, the wines excellent. Toasts followed one after another, each more pompous than the last. Harper's father spoke of the Radley family legacy, his mother of what a beautiful couple he and Olivia made. No one offered me a toast, though traditionally the mother of the bride has that right. After dinner, the dancing began. The newlyweds' first dance was a flawlessly rehearsed waltz to a classical tune. Then Harper's father asked Olivia to dance, and Harper danced with his mother. I sat at the table watching my daughter twirl in the arms of her new father-in-law and felt completely superfluous at this celebration of life. "Would you like to dance?" Came a familiar voice. I looked up and saw Connor Abernathy standing next to my table with his hand outstretched. "Connor," I smiled, feeling relieved at the presence of a friendly face. "It would be my pleasure." He led me to the dance floor, where we joined the other couples dancing to a melodic jazz song. "How are you holding up?" he asked as we began to move to the beat of the music. "I've been better," I answered honestly. "But I'll get over it. It's not the first time." "I noticed that you've been put away from the center of the action again," he said disapprovingly. "That's unforgivable." "I'm used to it," I shrugged. "The important thing is that Olivia's happy. At least, I hope she is." Connor glanced over my shoulder at the newlyweds, who were now mingling with the guests. "You know, I've been working with Harper for 3 years now. He's ambitious and sometimes efficient, but he has a nasty habit of belittling those he considers beneath him in status." "I've noticed," I replied dryly. "If he knew who you really are—" "But he doesn't," I interrupted. "And for now, I'd rather keep it that way. At least for tonight. I don't want to create a scene at my daughter's wedding." Connor nodded, but I could see he didn't agree with my decision. When the music ended, we walked back to the edge of the dance floor. At that moment, Harper approached us in the company of two men in expensive suits. "Ah, Connor," he exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. "I was just looking for you. I want to introduce you to Jeffrey Pinkerton from Alpha Investments and Logan Elliott from Meridian Bank. They are interested in cooperating with our company." Only then did he seem to notice me. "Ah, Mrs. Huxtable," he said with barely concealed disdain. "Let me introduce you to my colleagues. Jeffrey, Logan, this is Olivia's mother." The men nodded politely at me, but it was obvious they weren't interested in me. "Beverly, if I'm not mistaken." One of them, Logan, asked. "What do you do if it's no secret?" Before I could answer, Harper interjected, "Oh, Beverly's currently unemployed. Worked in some kind of factory all her life, if I understand correctly. Now she's retired, watching TV and knitting socks." He chuckled. "You know, the only thing my beautiful wife inherited from her to my beautiful wife." Luckily, Olivia was able to escape that environment because of her persistence and, of course, my support. I stood there, numb with shock and humiliation. Even on his wedding day, even in the face of his boss, he couldn't resist humiliating me. Logan and Jeffrey looked slightly embarrassed, but continued to smile politely. Connor froze beside me, and I felt his shoulders tense. "Actually, Harper," he began slowly, stepping forward, "you're wrong. Beverly and I know each other well. She's my business partner." Harper froze, his smile frozen on his face. "I beg your pardon?" Thanks to Beverly, our company was able to launch a new product line last year, Connor continued, looking straight into Harper's eyes. Her investment and business acumen have been invaluable to our growth. Jeffrey and Logan were now looking at me with a completely different expression, a mixture of surprise and sudden interest. Yeah, I don't understand, Harper muttered, shifting his gaze from me to Connor and back again. What investment? Olivia never mentioned. Because Olivia doesn't know, I said, finally finding my voice. I preferred to keep my financial situation private. I wanted people to appreciate me for who I was, not my bank account. Harper's face paled. But your house, your clothes, you always look modest, I finished for him. Yes, I prefer a modest lifestyle. That doesn't mean I can't afford more. Connor put his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support. Beverly sold her industrial chemicals company 5 years ago for 8 zeros and came to me for help with the investment. Jeffrey whistled. Dash. Huxtable Chemical? That was your company? Impressive. Harper looked like he was about to have a stroke. His eyes darted between us like he was looking for a catch, some sign that this was all a joke. But why didn't you say anything? He finally squeezed it out. I looked him straight in the eye. Would you have treated me differently if you'd known I was rich? I asked. Would you stop calling me an unemployed loser? Would you respect me as a person? He opened his mouth, but couldn't get a word out. And by the way, I added, feeling the years of pent-up irritation finally breaking through, I'm not just an investor in Connor's company. I own a controlling interest, the very company where you work, dear son-in-law. So technically, I'm your boss. Harper staggered like he'd been hit. His face turned ash gray. Yeah, I didn't know. I would never. Of course you wouldn't. I nodded. You judge people by the way they look, the price of their clothes, and the make of their cars. You never try to find out what kind of person is behind those trappings. By now, a small crowd of guests, attracted by the unusual scene, had begun to gather around us. I noticed Olivia among them, pushing her way forward with a look of alarm on her face. What's going on? She asked, coming toward us. Harper, are you okay? You look terrible. Harper didn't answer, continuing to stare at me with an expression of shock and horror. Your husband just found out something interesting about your mother, Connor said with a slight smile. Maybe you should hear it too, Olivia. Olivia shifted her gaze from Connor to me, her eyebrows drawn together in confusion. Mom? What is he talking about? I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had come sooner than I'd planned, but maybe it was for the best. Honey, I'm not exactly the unemployed loser your husband made me out to be, I said, trying to speak softly. In fact, I sold Huxtable Chemical for a sum that makes me one of the richest women in Riverside, and I own a controlling interest in the company where Harper works. Olivia froze, her eyes widening with shock. What? But, why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep living in that old house? Why did you let Harper say those things about you? Because I wanted to see how people felt about me when they thought I had nothing, I answered, including you, Olivia. Her face flashed. You've been testing me? Is this some kind of cruel experiment? No, honey, I shook my head. It was a test of character. And I have to say, the results have not been not what I'd hoped for. Harper, finally out of his stupor, grabbed Olivia's hand. Olivia, I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear, if I had only known, I would have never. Wouldn't have humiliated my mother at every turn? Olivia interrupted him, and to my surprise, there was anger in her voice. Wouldn't call her a loser? Wouldn't sit her at the farthest table at our wedding? I've never seen my daughter defend me like that, and it caught me off guard. I thought you just didn't notice how he was treating me. I said quietly. But you did, and you let it go on anyway. Olivia looked at me, and I could see the shame in her eyes. Yeah, I just wanted everything to be perfect, she whispered. His family, his situation. I thought I'd finally found what I'd always wanted. And now? I asked. What do you want now? She didn't have time to answer because Harper suddenly dropped to one knee in front of me, causing a rumble of surprise among the guests. Mrs. Huxtable, he said, with a note of despair in his voice, I apologize for all I have said and done. I have been inexcusably rude and arrogant. I didn't know. Exactly, I interrupted him, not hiding my disgust. You didn't know, so you thought you could treat me like garbage, which says a lot more about you than you realize. I turned my back on him and turned to Connor, Jeffrey, and Logan. Gentlemen, I think we should discuss your future in the company, dear son-in-law. I'm considering a promotion or demotion, depending on how this conversation goes. I heard Harper sigh convulsively behind me. Olivia stood beside him, her face pale and shocked. Mom, she said quietly, we need to talk. In private. I will, sweetheart, I nodded. But not now. You have a wedding now, and the guests are waiting. We'll talk tomorrow. With that, I nodded to Connor, and we walked away from the shocked couple, leaving them in the middle of a circle of curious guests, eager to find out what drama had played out at the perfect Huxtable Radley wedding. The morning after the wedding greeted me with a headache and a sense of devastation. I didn't sleep well, constantly replaying the events of last night in my head. After our confrontation with Harper, the wedding festivities continued, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The guests were whispering in corners, casting curious glances at me. Olivia smiled strainedly, but I could see her seething inside. Harper looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. I left the party early, citing fatigue. Connor volunteered to drive me home, and we were silent the whole way. He knew I needed time to process what had happened. You did the right thing, he said when we pulled up in front of my house. He deserved it. Maybe, I said. But I wasn't sure that Olivia felt that way. Give her time, Connor advised. She's a smart girl. She's just confused. I nodded, though I doubted it would be that easy. Now, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of strong tea, I waited for the inevitable. I knew Olivia was coming. The only question was how angry she would be. I got my answer at 10:30 in the morning when the front door swung open with such force that it hit the wall. Olivia had stormed in like a hurricane, not even bothering to knock. How could you? She shouted, flying into the kitchen. Her face was red with anger, her eyes red, probably from crying. How could you do this to me? I calmly placed the cup on the table and looked at my daughter. Hello, Olivia. It's good to see you too. Don't you dare. She slapped her palm on the table. Don't you dare be so calm after what you've done. You ruined my wedding, my perfect day. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. Sit down, please. Let's talk like adults. I don't want to sit down. I want to know why you kept it from me that you were rich. Why did you let me think you were just a poor old retired lady? I never said I was poor, I pointed out. You made that conclusion yourself because you live in this backwater. She put her hand around my kitchen. Wearing department store clothes. You take the bus. Anyone would think you had no money. I shook my head. I live my life the way I'm comfortable, Olivia. Money doesn't change who I am. But it does change the way people treat you, she exclaimed. Do you have any idea how I felt when everyone found out that my mother was a rich businesswoman and not who she said she was? And how do you think I felt when your husband called me an unemployed loser in front of everyone? I asked quietly. When you laughed at his jokes about me? Olivia was silent for a moment, then shook her head. That's different. You, you should have told me. I'm your daughter. Yes, you are my daughter. And that's why I wanted you to love me for who I am, not my bank account. I did love you, she screamed. But you've always been so down to earth, always talking in that horrible accent, always obsessed with your chemical factory. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up as the daughter of the queen of industrial chemistry? My classmates laughed at me. I felt anger rising inside. All these years I had tried to give Olivia the best I could, and she was ashamed of me. That chemical factory paid for your education, your apartment, your car, I said, trying to speak calmly. It allowed you to grow up in comfort and security after your father died. And yes, I have an accent. I grew up in a working class family, and I'm proud of my roots, unlike some people. Olivia clenched her fists. Why didn't you tell me about selling the company? About the money? I had a right to know. Would it have made a difference? I asked. Would you have called more often? Would you stop being ashamed of me in front of your rich friends? Of course, I would. She hesitated. I'd help you move to a decent neighborhood, buy you some decent clothes, teach you how to behave in society. I felt something inside me snap. My own daughter thought I needed lessons in how to behave in society. I mean, you'd change me, I said quietly. Make me decent by your standards. Not because you love me for who I am, but because you're ashamed of who I am. That's not what I meant, she grumbled, but I could see that I'd hit the mark. That's exactly what I meant, Olivia, and that's why I didn't tell you about the money. I wanted to see if you could accept me for who I am without all of this. I circled my arm, mimicking her gesture. Without the status, no prestige, just me, your mother. She sank into the chair across from me, suddenly looking very tired. And I failed the test, didn't I? She asked bitterly. Is that why you made this spectacle of yourself at my wedding? To punish me? No, I shook my head. I never planned on revealing it at your wedding. But when Harper called me an unemployed loser in front of his co-workers, I sighed. Something inside of me snapped. I was tired of pretending, tired of enduring his disdain. You could have waited, she exclaimed. You could have told me later instead of ruining my day. Your day was ruined not by my disclosure, but by your husband's behavior, I said. If he hadn't publicly humiliated me, none of this would have happened. Don't shift the blame. Olivia jumped up from her chair. You kept the truth from me for years, and then you decided to cause drama at my wedding. Did you know that half the guests left early? That Harper's parents are in shock? That I look like an idiot because I didn't know my own mother was a millionaire? Billionaire, to be exact. I corrected myself automatically and immediately regretted it. Olivia stared at me wide-eyed. Billionaire? She repeated in a whisper. You have over $1 billion? I nodded. The investment had turned out to be a great success. She slowly sank back into her chair, stunned. And all these years, you could have lived anywhere, done anything. And instead, you stayed here in this old house and worked in the library for a pittance? I love this house, I said simply. It's where your father and I lived. This is where you took your first steps. It's where I feel like myself. And working at the library isn't a job, it's volunteering. I run a reading circle because I love books, and I love sharing that love with others. Olivia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I've never understood you, she said finally. All my life I thought you were just stuck, in the past, in this house, in your habits, and you. You could live in a mansion on the ocean, travel the world, have everything you want. I have everything I want, I replied, except maybe one thing, the respect of my daughter. Olivia flinched as if I'd hit her. It's not fair, she said quietly. You've always been different, so different from my friends' mothers. They went to dinner parties and did charity work and wore pearls and spoke correctly. And you smelled of chemicals and you had this horrible accent and you never fit in. And it made you ashamed of me, I finished for her. She didn't deny it, and that silence hurt more than any words could. I always wanted more, she finally said. I always knew I wouldn't stay in Riverside forever, wouldn't work in a factory like you. I wanted a different life. And you got it, I nodded. You chose the path you thought was right. But did you ever wonder what kind of man your husband really is? Not his status, not his money, not his connections, but himself? Olivia frowned. Harper is a successful man. He's ambitious, driven, and he thinks it's okay to humiliate people he thinks are beneath him, I added, even if it is his wife's mother. He just, he didn't know you, she murmured, but without much conviction. He knew enough. He knew I was your mother. That should have been enough to treat me with respect. We sat in silence for a while, both of us immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, Olivia spoke again, and her voice sounded different, quieter, more uncertain. What are you going to do about Harper? Are you really going to fire him? I sighed. I don't know, Olivia. I haven't decided yet. He's scared, she said. He's been up all night thinking about what you might do to his career. Okay, I nodded. Let him think about the consequences of his actions. Mom, please. She looked at me pleadingly for the first time in a long time. He's my husband. Whatever you think of him, I chose him. And I don't want our married life to start with my mother ruining his career. I looked at her closely. What about what he said about me? Doesn't that bother you? She looked away. Of course it bothers me. Yeah, I talked to him about it. He admits he was wrong. Only because he found out I was rich, I pointed out. If I really was the unemployed loser he thought I was, his attitude wouldn't have changed. People change, Mom, she said. Give him a chance. At that moment, the doorbell rang. We both flinched in surprise. Are you expecting someone? Olivia asked. I shook my head and went to open the door. Harper stood on the doorstep, looking wrinkled and gaunt, as if he'd really been up all night. Dash Mrs. Huxtable, he said with a nervous smile. Yeah, may I come in? I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. He made his way into the living room, where Olivia was already standing, clearly surprised to see him. Harper, what are you doing here? I came to apologize, he said, looking at me. In person, I realized my behavior was inexcusable, and I want to apologize. I crossed my arms over my chest. Dash. Go on. He swallowed nervously. I was arrogant and rude. I judged you based on outward appearances alone, and that was wrong. Yeah, I would never have said those things if I'd known who you really were. And that's the problem, Harper, I said calmly. You shouldn't have said those things anyway, no matter who I am or how much money I have. You should have respected me as a human being and as your wife's mother. He lowered his eyes. Dash, I know. You're right. Yeah, I was blinded by my ambition, my desire for status. I wanted to impress the right people, and I thought that associating with someone who I perceived as, less prestigious might damage my image. Very honest, I nodded. And what's different now? He looked up at me. Everything. I saw how wrong I'd been, how narrow-minded I'd been. You built an empire from the ground up. You deserve respect, no matter how you dress or where you live. I watched him carefully, trying to see how sincere his words were. But all I saw was fear. The fear of a man who was afraid of losing his job, his status, everything he held so dear. You're afraid I'll fire you, I said bluntly. He flinched, but nodded. Yes, I am. This job. It's very important to me and Olivia. More than respect for other people? I asked. More than basic human decency? He didn't have an answer, and that spoke louder than any words. Mom, please, Olivia intervened. He's sorry. He realized his mistake. He's sorry he didn't know who I was, I corrected him. He's sorry for insulting the person who could ruin his career. But I doubt he regrets the very principle of judging people by their appearance and social status. Harper turned even paler. Dash Mrs. Huxtable, I swear I will change. Yeah, I'll be a better person. Give me a chance to prove it. I looked at this man who yesterday had looked down on me and today was willing to crawl at my feet to save his career. There was something deeply sad about that transformation. Do you know that I can not only fire you, but I can make sure you don't get hired by any decent company in Riverside? I asked. He nodded, turning even paler. I know, and I realize I deserve it. But, but I'm asking you to think about Olivia, your daughter. We just got married. We have our whole lives ahead of us. If you do this, you'll not only punish me, you'll punish her. It was a low blow, and he knew it, using my love for my daughter to protect himself. I felt anger rising inside, but I held it back. Leave us alone, I said quietly. I need to talk to my daughter alone. Harper gave Olivia a quick glance, as if looking for support, but then nodded and headed for the exit. I'll be waiting in the car, he said to Olivia as he passed. When the door closed behind him, I turned to my daughter. Do you really love him? I asked bluntly. She looked caught off guard. Of course I do. I married him. People marry for all sorts of reasons, I said. Did you marry him out of love or because he represented the lifestyle you dreamed of? Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly not finding a quick answer. Yeah, I don't know what you want me to say, she said finally. Yes, I like his lifestyle, his ambition, his social circle, but I also love him. He's smart, he's driven, he knows what he wants out of life. And how do I fit into that picture? I asked. As an unemployed loser or as a rich businesswoman? She looked away. That's not a fair question. No, it's the most honest question I could ask, I countered. Because the point is, Olivia, I'm the same person in both cases. I haven't changed. Only your perception of me, yours and Harper's, changed when you found out about my financial situation. She was silent, and I could see that my words had struck a nerve. I won't fire him, I said finally. Not for his sake, but for yours. But I'm also not going to pretend that nothing happened. He's going to have to prove that he's changed, that he's capable of treating people with respect, regardless of their social status or financial status. Olivia looked up at me, and I saw a mixture of relief and something else, maybe shame. Thank you, she said quietly. Yeah, I'll talk to him. He'll understand. I hope so, I nodded. And I hope you do too, Olivia. Life isn't just about appearances and social status. It's depth. It's authenticity. It's being able to see the person behind all those trappings. She nodded, though I wasn't sure she really understood what I was saying. I have to go, she said, heading for the door. Harper's waiting. Of course, I walked her to the door. When do you leave for your honeymoon? Tomorrow, she said. 2 weeks in the Maldives. That sounds wonderful, I smiled. I wish you a good vacation. She nodded and turned to leave, but then she turned and gave me a quick hug. I love you, Mom, she said softly, even if I don't always know how to show it. I hugged her back, feeling my eyes fill with tears. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in the world. She pulled away, nodded, and quickly walked out without looking back. I stood in the doorway, watching her get into the car, where Harper was waiting for her. They talked briefly about something. Then he started the car and they drove off. I closed the door and leaned my back against it, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Talking to my daughter had stirred up a lot of old resentments and painful memories, but perhaps it was necessary. Perhaps only by going through it could we find a way to be more sincere and respectful of each other. One thing I knew for sure: neither Harper nor even Olivia had truly changed during that day. They had a long way to go to realize that a person's true worth wasn't measured by the size of their bank account or the prestige of their social circle, and I wasn't sure if they were ready to go down that road. 2 days after the wedding incident, I met Connor at his office, located in one of Riverside's tallest buildings. The glass walls and steel structures reflected the sunlight, giving the impression of transparency and cleanliness that is so prized in modern business. My old Huxtable Chemical was located in an industrial area of the city, in a squat brick building that many considered unattractive, but to me it had always been a symbol of honest work and real achievement. Connor's secretary, a young woman with impeccable hair and an attentive gaze, ushered me into his office. Connor stood up from his desk as soon as I entered and smiled welcomingly. "Beverly, thank you for coming. You look rested." I grinned. We both knew that wasn't true. The last few days had been emotionally draining, and the traces of it were surely reflected on my face. "You were always a bad liar, Connor," I said, shaking his outstretched hand. "But thanks for trying." He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his desk and returned to his seat. "How did the conversation with Olivia and Harper go?" he asked, pouring us both water from the carafe. I sighed, accepting the glass. Not easy. Olivia's more upset about the ruined wedding than her husband's behavior. And Harper? Well, he's terrified at the prospect of losing his job. Suddenly, he's full of remorse and promises to change. Connor hummed. "Dash, I can imagine. He's always been very adaptive when it comes to his career." He paused for a moment. "What have you decided?" I set my glass on the table and looked out the window at the cityscape of Riverside. This city had been my home all my life. It's where I grew up, got married, had a daughter, built a business. I knew it inside and out, from the working class neighborhoods to the fancy neighborhoods where Olivia and her husband now lived. "I don't want to fire him," I said finally. "Not for his sake, but for Olivia's. As much as she disappoints me sometimes, she's my daughter, and I don't want to start their family life with a blow like that." Connor nodded. "I respect your decision, but don't you think he deserves some consequences for his behavior?" "He definitely does," I agreed, "and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. What are our options?" Connor leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the armrest thoughtfully. "Well, given your position as majority shareholder, we have almost unlimited options. We could transfer him to another department, demote him, cut his salary, strip him of his bonuses." He paused. "Or a combination of all of those things?" I smiled. "Let's not be too cruel. I want to teach him a lesson, not ruin his life." "Fair enough," Connor nodded. "What do you suggest?" I'd been thinking about this question since our conversation with Olivia and Harper. I needed to find a balance between a fair punishment and preserving my relationship with my daughter. "I think a transfer to another department would be a smart move," I said. "Something with fewer growth prospects and a more modest salary, but still stable enough for him to support his family." Connor thought for a moment. "There's an opening in the compliance department. Lots of paperwork, minimal creativity, no big deals or commissions. The base salary is decent, but without the huge bonuses he was used to in the investment department." "Sounds about right," I nodded. "Would that be sufficiently tangible for him?" "Oh, believe me," Connor grinned. "For someone like Harper, it will be very tangible. His self-esteem is heavily tied to his status in the company and the size of his bonuses. He'll feel it every day. Okay, I nodded. But I want to be clear, this isn't revenge. This is the consequences of his own actions. And if he really changes, shows respect for people regardless of their status, shows real growth, then in a year or two, we can reevaluate his position. Connor looked at me carefully. Do you really believe he's capable of changing? I pondered the question. Harper Radley had built his whole life on the trappings of success, prestige, money, social status. Would he be able to truly redefine his values? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I want to give him a chance, for Olivia's sake, and maybe the experience of being in a less prestigious position will teach him a little humility. Fair enough, Connor agreed. I'll arrange the transfer next week when they get back from their honeymoon. Thank you, I smiled, and thanks for your support at the wedding. I hadn't planned on making a scene, but don't apologize, he interrupted me. He deserved it. To be honest, I'd wanted to put him in his place for a long time. I just didn't have a good enough reason. We were quiet for a while, enjoying the quiet solidarity that had always existed between us. Connor was one of the few people who appreciated me for my intelligence and business acumen, not my trappings. Do you think, he finally asked, this will affect your relationship with Olivia? I sighed, looking out the window at the city where my daughter was now building her new life. They're already affected, I answered. The truth had finally come out, and we'd both seen things we might have preferred not to see. She learned that I had deliberately kept my financial situation from her. I saw how deeply ashamed she was of me and my background. It's hard, Connor said softly, but maybe this is the beginning of something more sincere between you two. Maybe, I agreed, though I wasn't sure of it. Time would tell. After my meeting with Connor, I decided to walk around town instead of going straight home. The day was clear and warm, perfect for a leisurely stroll. I walked down the streets of Riverside, looking at the storefronts, watching people going about their business. As I passed a jewelry store, I noticed a pearl necklace, very similar to the one Edgar had given me years ago. I stopped, looking at it and thinking about my late husband. What would he say about the current situation? About our daughter, who was so eager to escape the world he and I lived in and loved? Edgar was always a straightforward man, without pretense or falsity. He valued honest work, respect for people, and integrity of character above all the trappings of success. Olivia was very young when he died, and I often wondered how her values would have turned out if he had been around when she was growing up. I continued on my journey, reflecting on how much my life has changed in recent years. Selling the company gave me financial freedom I never dreamed of, but it also put questions in front of me for which I had no ready answers. How to move on with my life, what to devote my time to, how to use my resources to my advantage. One of the answers came unexpectedly as I passed by the city library. Remembering my reading circle, I realized that it was simple things like this that brought me real joy. Sharing my love of books, helping others discover new worlds through literature, creating a community of like-minded people. That was what gave my life meaning, regardless of the amount of money in my bank account. When I got home, I made myself some tea and settled on the veranda with a book. The house was quiet as usual, but today that silence seemed more peaceful than lonely. I was enjoying a moment of peace after the tumultuous events of the past few days. My phone rang, interrupting my musings. Olivia's name popped up on the screen. I felt both joy and anxiety that she'd called and anxiety about what the call might mean. Hello, darling, I answered. How was the honeymoon packing? Hi, Mom. Olivia's voice sounded a little strained. Packing? Well, actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I felt my shoulders tense. Something in her tone told me that this conversation wasn't going to be pleasant. What's wrong? I asked. Olivia paused, and I heard her take a deep breath before she continued. Mom, I know things are complicated between us right now, but I need your help, financial help. I wasn't surprised, but I still felt a prick of disappointment. What exactly happened, Olivia? Well, we booked a very expensive resort in the Maldives for our honeymoon, with a private villa over the water, private butler, and everything. And we've already put down a deposit, but now we have to pay the balance, and it's a lot. And why can't you pay it? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Well, we were counting on the money we'd get as wedding gifts, but a lot of the guests, you know, after what happened at the wedding, they left early and didn't leave envelopes of money as planned, and others gave less than we expected. I was silent, giving her a chance to continue, and she continued, the words flowing faster and faster as if she wanted to spit it all out at once before I interrupted her. And Harper put a lot of money into organizing the wedding. He wanted everything to be perfect, the best restaurant, the best flowers, the best photographer. And his parents helped with some of it, but not all of it. And now, if we can't pay the rest for the resort, we will lose the deposit, which is tens of thousands of dollars. I listened to her explanation, feeling a growing frustration. Not a word about how they could have chosen a simpler place. Not a hint that they could have postponed the honeymoon until they had saved up the money. Just the expectation that I, her suddenly rich mother, should solve their financial problems. Olivia, I said when she finally stopped to catch her breath, are you calling me to ask me for money for your honeymoon? Yeah, yes, she answered, and there was a strange combination of shame and confidence in her voice that I wouldn't say no. We know you can afford it, Mom, and this is a special occasion, our honeymoon. We'll pay you back as soon as we can, I promise. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. What does Harper say about this? Does he know you're calling me with this request? There was a pause. Yes, he does, she finally answered. In fact, he said that after everything that had happened, you might want to make up for ruining the wedding. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. So that's how they decided to interpret the situation. Not that Harper had publicly humiliated me, but that I had ruined their perfect wedding by revealing my financial status. Make amends? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. That's an interesting formulation. Well, you know what I mean, Olivia said hurriedly. This whole situation was so awkward for everyone. People are still talking about it. Some of Harper's friends are even teasing him about it. That's a shame, I said dryly. He must be very unhappy that people found out how he treated his wife's mother. Mom, please, she said, a hint of irritation in her voice. Can't we just put this behind us? I'm asking for your help. This is important to us. I closed my eyes, feeling deeply tired. Here she is, my daughter, who just a couple days ago found out I was a billionaire, and already she's calling asking for money. Not to talk, not to apologize for her silent complicity in Harper's humiliation, but to ask to fund their luxurious honeymoon. How much do you need? I asked, just to get a sense of the magnitude of their request. $150,000, she answered quickly, as if she was afraid that if she hesitated, I would change my mind. That would cover the rest of the resort fee and give us some money for expenses during the trip. $150,000 for a 2-week vacation, an amount that for many families in Riverside was a year's income, and for some, the price of their home. No, I said after a long pause. What? Her voice sounded like she couldn't believe her ears. I said, no, Olivia, I'm not giving you money for your honeymoon. But, but why? She sounded both shocked and outraged. You can afford it. It's a small thing for you. It's not about whether I can afford it, I said calmly. It's about principle. You and Harper decided to organize a wedding and a honeymoon that you couldn't afford. You did it without consulting me, without even knowing my financial situation. And now that you know I'm rich, you expect me to just open my wallet and solve your problems. That's not fair, she exclaimed. You've been hiding from me that you're rich all these years. If I had known, I would have. What? I interrupted her. Would you have loved me more? More respect? Wouldn't have let my husband call me an unemployed loser? There was silence. I could hear her heavy breathing on the other end of the line. That's not what I meant, she said quietly at last. Then what did you mean, Olivia? I asked. Because it seems to me that I suddenly became a valuable asset to you and Harper only after you found out about my condition. That's not true, she protested, but there was no conviction in her voice. You are my mother. I have always loved you. And yet you let your fiancé humiliate me. You laughed at his jokes about my accent, my job, my house. You sat me at the farthest table at your wedding, as if I were some distant relative you couldn't help but invite, but would rather not see. Mom, please. Her voice trembled. Yeah, I admit I've made mistakes. But are you really going to punish us by denying us help when we need it? I sighed. It was typical of Olivia to reframe the situation so that she was the victim and I was the villain. I'm not punishing you, Olivia. I'm just not condoning your irresponsible financial behavior. If you can't afford a vacation to the Maldives, choose something more affordable or postpone the honeymoon until you've saved up enough money. But we've already paid the deposit, she exclaimed. We're going to lose tens of thousands of dollars. That's unfortunate, I agreed. But it will be a good lesson for the future. Don't spend money you don't have, hoping someone else will cover the difference. I could hear her breathing heavily, clearly trying to contain her anger. I can't believe you're doing this to us, she finally said. After everything that's happened, after you ruined our wedding. Olivia? I interrupted her, feeling my patience wearing thin. I didn't ruin your wedding. It was Harper's neglect of me that ruined it, and the fact that the two of you still don't realize it speaks volumes. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice sounded cold and detached. Okay, I understand. Don't worry, we'll manage on our own. I'm sorry I bothered you. And she hung up without waiting for my response. I sat staring at the phone in my hand, feeling a mixture of sadness and disappointment. I had expected something like this, but it still hurt to hear how quickly our relationship had gone from mutual accusations to a direct request for money. Material possessions. That's what had become the most important thing to Olivia. Status, prestige, expensive things, a lavish lifestyle. I couldn't help but wonder where I had gone wrong in her upbringing. Was it my total immersion in business after Edgar's death? My focus on financial security instead of emotional connection? Or had Olivia simply chosen that path on her own, rejecting the values she'd grown up with in favor of a more glamorous and superficial life? I didn't know the answer, but I did know that I wasn't going to fuel this pursuit of material possessions. If Olivia and Harper wanted to live large, they would have to earn it themselves. I put the phone away and went back to my book, but the words blurred before my eyes. Thoughts of my daughter, her election, and our future filled my mind, leaving no room for the fantasy worlds described on the pages. Perhaps this denial of financial aid would be a turning point in our relationship. Perhaps it would force Olivia and Harper to reevaluate their priorities and values. Or perhaps it will only deepen the gap between us, turning it into an insurmountable chasm. Time would tell. In the meantime, I had to stay true to my principles, even if it meant disappointing the daughter I loved most in the world. It had been a month since Olivia and Harper had returned from their honeymoon, which they'd managed to pay for by taking out a loan. We hadn't communicated in all that time, no calls, no texts. After my denial of financial aid, Olivia seemed determined to keep her distance. It saddened me, but it didn't surprise me. During that month, my life had changed dramatically. I had finally decided to take advantage of the freedom my financial situation afforded me. Not to move into a luxurious mansion or buy an expensive car, but to expand my world, which for too long had been confined to work and home. I started by traveling to Italy, a country Edgar and I had always dreamed of but never had the chance to visit. For 2 weeks, I wandered the narrow streets of Florence, sat in the small cafes of Rome, and swam in the azure waters of the Amalfi Coast. I felt free, as if I had dropped a heavy load I didn't realize I was carrying. Upon returning to Riverside, I decided to continue these changes. Enrolled in an Italian cooking class that I had always wanted to try, but never found the time. I started attending an art studio where I learned to paint watercolors, a hobby I had dreamed of as a young girl, but had put off for more practical pursuits. But the most important change was the new people in my life. In a cooking class, I met Eleanor, a widow about my age with a sharp mind and an infectious laugh. In the art studio, I befriended Franklin, a former literature professor who had decided in retirement to take up painting. In my reading circle, I began to focus more on the social side of our meetings, organizing tea parties and discussions that went far beyond the books being discussed. Gradually, a circle of friends formed around me, real friends who valued me for my character, my wit, my sense of humor, not for the size of my bank account, which most of them didn't even know I had. One evening, Eleanor, Franklin, Eleanor, and I were having dinner at a little Italian restaurant called Bella Noce, discussing a book we had recently read in our circle. I think the main character did a selfish act, Franklin said, waving his fork to emphasize his words. He chose personal happiness at the cost of his family's suffering. But wasn't that his tragedy? Eleanor objected. He was caught between societal expectations and his true desires. Any choice would have led to suffering, either his own or that of his loved ones. I was about to add my opinion when I noticed the front door of the restaurant open and Olivia and Harper walked inside. My daughter was wearing an elegant cream-colored dress, her hair perfectly styled. Harper, in a strict suit, looked a little drained, with light shadows under his eyes. They stopped at the entrance, looking around, and Olivia's gaze stopped on me. I saw her eyes widen in surprise, and then she whispered something to Harper. He turned in my direction, and his face contorted for a moment before he pulled on a polite smile. "Beverly, what's wrong?" Eleanor asked, noticing my sudden silence. "My daughter and her husband just walked in," I answered quietly. Franklin and Eleanor turned around at the same time to stare. I briefly told them about my complicated relationship with Olivia, though I didn't go into all the details of the wedding incident. "Oh, honey," Eleanor murmured, squeezing my hand. "Do you want us to leave?" "No," I shook my head. "It's all right. We can continue our dinner." But it was getting late. Olivia and Harper were heading toward our table, both with strained smiles. "Mom," Olivia said, walking over to us. "What a coincidence. We didn't know you'd be here." "Olivia, Harper," I nodded to them both. Meet my friends, Eleanor Kinsley and Franklin Woodhouse. After the exchange of polite greetings, there was an awkward pause. "Would you like to join us?" Franklin offered, and I gave him a quick glance, not sure whether to thank him or curse him for the offer. Olivia and Harper looked at each other. "We'd love to," my daughter finally said. "If you don't mind." 2 extra chairs were quickly brought in, and soon we were all sitting at the same table, trying to keep up a casual conversation. Eleanor and Franklin did their best to smooth over the awkwardness by talking about our reading circle and painting courses. "So you've recently met my mom?" Olivia asked with a touch of surprise in her voice. Yes, about a month ago, Eleanor said. Beverly is a wonderful person. She knows so much about literature and art, and her stories about running a business are fascinating. I noticed Olivia tense up slightly at the mention of my business. Yeah, Mom's always been very passionate about her work, she said with a strained smile. And very successful at it from what I understand, Franklin added, and I mentally cringed. My new friends only knew that I had sold my business and retired, but not the size of my fortune. Yes, very much so, Harper replied dryly, entering the conversation for the first time. Mrs. Huxtable is a very enterprising woman. The tension at the table was building, despite Eleanor and Franklin's best efforts to keep the conversation casual. Finally, after a particularly long pause, Olivia leaned toward me. Mom, Harper and I actually wanted to talk to you. Alone, if possible. I looked at my friends. Eleanor, Franklin, would you mind if we— Of course, dear, Eleanor said quickly, standing up. We were just about to leave. It was very nice to meet you, Olivia, Harper. Franklin followed suit, and after a brief goodbye, they left, leaving me alone with my daughter and son-in-law. So, I said when the three of us were alone, you wanted to talk to me? Olivia looked at Harper, as if they'd discussed who would start the conversation. Mom, she said finally, we wanted to apologize for everything that happened. The wedding, that phone call, everything. I stared at her carefully, trying to determine how sincere her words were. We've been doing a lot of thinking over the last month, she continued, and we realized that we've been acting wrong, especially Harper. My brother-in-law nodded, his face expressing remorse that didn't reach his eyes, however. Mrs. Huxtable, he said, I have been terribly rude and arrogant. There is no excuse for my behavior. Yeah, I want you to know that I deeply regret it. I remained silent, waiting for them to continue. Something in their tone, in the way they held themselves, told me that this wasn't just an apology. And we want to start over, Olivia added, reaching across the table to touch mine. We're a family, Mom. We have to stick together. What caused this change? I asked bluntly. A month ago, you accused me of ruining your wedding, and now all of a sudden you want to start over? Olivia blushed slightly. I was upset, Mom. This whole situation, it took me by surprise. But now that I've had time to think about it, I've realized how important family ties are. Harper nodded, seconding her words. And I've realized a lot too, he added. Especially after I moved to a new department. It was sobering experience. Ah, that's it. Connor had followed our plan and transferred Harper to the compliance department. From the looks of him, it was indeed a sobering experience. I'm sorry your new position isn't fulfilling for you, Harper, I said in a neutral tone. No, that's not what I meant, he quickly countered. I really appreciate the opportunity. It, it gives me a new perspective. We just want to repair our relationship, Mom, Olivia interjected. We've missed you. I watched them both carefully, trying to discern the true motives behind those words. The more I looked, the clearer I saw what they were trying to hide. Calculation. They didn't miss me. They missed the potential access to my fortune. I appreciate your apology, I said after a pause. But I think there's something else you want to talk about. They exchanged glances again, and this time Harper took the lead. Actually, yes, he said, leaning forward. Olivia and I have been thinking about the future, about starting a family, buying a house, the usual things young couples do. The usual things young couples do. But with my new position at the company, he continued, financially, it became more of a challenge. So we thought, maybe you could help us get started, not as a gift, but as an investment in our future. in the future of your daughter and perhaps your future grandchildren. This is it. The real reason for their sudden desire to reconnect, not remorse, not longing for family ties, but simple financial necessity. Harper was losing his big bonuses at his new position, and they were looking for a new source of funding for their lavish lifestyle. I understand, I said calmly. And how much do you think it would take to make this investment in your future? Olivia quickly interjected. We don't want to talk about specific amounts right now, Mom. That's not the point. It's about our relationship. Of course, I nodded, not hiding my sarcasm. That's why you started the conversation with an apology and then went straight to the money. Harper had the nerve to look offended. Mrs. Huxtable, you misunderstand us. We sincerely want to mend the relationship. The question of financial aid is secondary. Then let's put it aside, I suggested. Let's focus on repairing our relationship without mentioning money. Let's say for the next 6 months. I saw their faces tense at the thought of 6 months without financial support. Olivia was the first to answer. Mom, we want that. We really do. But the reality is that we're facing financial difficulties right now, and we just thought that you, as a loving mother, would want to help. Like I said when you called about the honeymoon, I'm not going to encourage your irresponsible financial behavior, I replied firmly. If you can't afford a luxury home or an expensive lifestyle on Harper's salary, choose something more modest. But that's not fair, Olivia blurted out, and for a moment the mask of politeness slipped from her face. You're sitting on billions you don't even use, and we're supposed to make every dime count. Olivia, Harper said warningly, but it was too late. So here's the thing, I said, leaning back in my chair. You think you're entitled to my money just because I'm your mother, not because you earned it, not because you treated me with respect and love, but simply by birthright. Don't twist my words, Olivia snapped back. All I'm saying is that a family should support each other, and you refuse to help your only daughter when you have every opportunity to do so. I sighed, feeling deeply tired. This conversation had made it clear that despite all their words of reconciliation, Olivia and Harper hadn't changed. They still saw me as a source of money, not as a person with feelings and principles. I think you'll be interested to know, I said after a pause, that I recently rewrote my will. This caught their attention. Both of them froze, their eyes widening. A will? Harper asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Yes, I nodded. I've been thinking a lot about how to handle my estate since all this happened, and I've come to the conclusion that most of it should go to causes that will really benefit society. What do you mean? Olivia asked, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I've started an educational foundation, I explained, one that will fund scholarships for underprivileged children so that they can get a quality education, especially those interested in science and technology. The Education Foundation, Harper repeated, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Yes, I confirmed. 80% of my fortune will go there. The remaining 20 will be divided among a few close friends and some long-term employees who've been with me through some difficult times. And me? Olivia's voice trembled. Your only daughter? I looked her straight in the eye. You're getting this house, I said calmly. The one you called backwater, and a small amount of money, enough to live comfortably, but not luxuriously. We'll have to earn the rest. Olivia's face turned pale, and Harper looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. You can't do this, Olivia whispered. I'm your daughter, your flesh and blood. I can and I did, I answered firmly. The will is already signed and witnessed, and you know what? It was one of the most liberating decisions of my life. But why? She exclaimed, and now there was real desperation in her voice. Why are you doing this to us? Because I finally realized, Olivia, I said, leaning forward, that money won't make you happy. It won't teach you to appreciate people for who they are, not what they have. They won't give you the character and fortitude that helped me build a business from the ground up. They will only reinforce your worst qualities: greed, superficiality, contempt for those you consider beneath you. She looked at me wide-eyed, as if seeing me for the first time. "You're doing this to punish me," she said at last, "for marrying Harper, for letting him say those things about you." "No, honey," I shook my head. "I'm doing this to give you a chance to be a better person, so that you can find real values in life, instead of chasing after a false glitter that will never bring you true happiness." Harper seemed to have finally regained the power of speech. "You can't be serious," he said, and his tone became almost pleading. "Dash, Mrs. Huxtable, think of your daughter, of your family." "I have thought of them, Harper," I answered, long and hard, "and I've decided that the best gift I can give Olivia is not money, but a lesson about what was really important in life." I stood up from the table, feeling oddly calm. This conversation could have upset me, even broken my heart, but instead I felt light, as if I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying for too long. "The bill's paid," I said, putting on my coat. "Have a nice evening. Mom, wait." Olivia jumped up from her seat. "You can't just leave like that." "I can, honey." I smiled at her softly but firmly. "And I am. When you're ready for a real relationship based on love and respect, not financial gain, you'll know where to find me." I turned and walked toward the exit, feeling the stares of the other diners caught up in our conversation. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Free of expectations, free of obligations to those who didn't appreciate me, free of the guilt that had always accompanied my relationship with my daughter. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath of the fresh evening air. Tomorrow, I was flying to Greece, another place I'd always wanted to visit. And after that, who knows? The world was full of possibilities, and I finally had the freedom to explore them. I walked down the streets of Riverside with my head held high, feeling like I had finally broken the toxic bonds that had bound me for far too long. Olivia and Harper could continue their pursuit of status and material possessions, and I was choosing a different path: the path of authenticity, genuine relationships, and real values. Perhaps one day Olivia will realize the lesson I was trying to teach her. Perhaps she'll realize that true wealth isn't measured in money, and when that day comes, I'll be ready to welcome her with open arms. But until then, I was going to live my life without letting a toxic relationship poison my existence. As I walked past a city park, I noticed an elderly couple sitting on a bench. They were holding hands and laughing as they watched the children playing. There was something in their eyes that had never been in Olivia and Harper's eyes when they looked at each other: true love, based on deep respect and acceptance. I smiled, thinking that true values still existed in this world, even if my own daughter couldn't see them yet. And maybe those children whose education my foundation will fund will grow up with a better understanding of what is truly important. With that thought, I continued my journey home, feeling a strange peacefulness. Life went on, opening new doors and opportunities, and I was ready to step through that threshold with confidence and hope, leaving behind the toxic relationships and false values that had marred my life for too long.